I'm still not sure if it stays, but I'm definitely enjoying Subastral so far. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Subastral from Renegade Games, a set collection game which you're gathering a variety of biomes in the game. You're trying to gather a bunch of, well, sets. You're going to have numbers, you're going to have themes, you're going to have all these things. There's a whole thematic aspect of the various nature collections, but basically, this is a set collection game. You're trying to gather things to score as efficiently as possible, and let's go ahead and show you how you score before we show you how you play, because I think that will help to a degree. What you're going to be doing is the first time you gather any biome, you're going to place it to the left over here. The second time you gather a biome, it's going to go there, and if I gather this one, it's going to layer on top of that. In other words, there is not a prescribed order, rather the order you gather things is the order you build out your sets. If I gather that, if I gather that, as we keep going, there's going to be 8 different biomes, and as you gather each new type, you simply layer it over the type you've already gathered, and that is why it is incredibly important. And let's go a few more before we call this a day, because I think it will help. Let's just grab that over here, because I think it'll help for you to fully understand exactly how this plays. And let's go over here like so, and then like so. Perfect. We have 7 out of 8 biomes, and let's go through how this game scores. You see, in the game, what you're going to do, let me just grab this rulebook with the scoring over here. In the game, what you're going to do is you're going to be scoring for your rows of unique biomes that you have, as well as for the fact that you have different numbers of biomes. Specifically, what you're going to do is you're going to score for each type here. So for example, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which means I'm getting 28 points. If I had all 8, I'd score 36 points. So I'm trying to get all that. Boom, I have different sets. Awesome. The more sets you have, the more points you score. One more card would have been worth an additional 8 points to me, which is awesome, because if you have only one card, well, it's worth 1 point. But that eighth card is worth 8 points to you. That's great. The problem is you're going to keep going. I'm going to score the next set, and I have 1, 2, 3, and that's all I have. And you're like, no, Alex, you missed the one over here. And the answer is no, I did not. You see, you only score for as you go left to right. As soon as I have a gap in my next set, I don't score for the rest of them, even if I had a full other repeat of all of those. Even if I had all of these, those are all wasted. This one missing card cost me, that set of 3 is going to be worth 6 points, and it could have been worth 28 points. A single missing card was worth 22 points to me in this case, which is why precision in Subastral is absolutely key. What you want is better than more. What you want, being specific, getting the right things, is an important aspect of this game, but wait! There's more. Because, in addition to having collections for those, you're also going to score for the 2 sets of cards that you have the most of. And let's, for a second, make this even more painful for you, okay? Because what you're going to do is you're going to score for having the most of 2 sets. In other words, this set over here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have a set of 3 over here and a set of 3 over here. You're going to look at those sets, and you're going to score for the position that you have times the number of cards. In other words, I have 5 cards in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fifth position. In other words, this is worth 25 points. If I had a 6th card there, which does not bother worrying about, if I had a 6th card over there, then that would be 6 times 5. I'd have 30 points. Now imagine if you have these as your 8th card. If you have 6 cards in your 8th position, that is 48 points on its own. That is a large amount of points to go if you get that in your 8th position. The next problem, though, is if things are tied, you always go to the left. In other words, I don't get to score 3 times 7, or 21 points over here. Instead, because I also have 3 over here, I score 3 times 2 for a mere 6 points. In other words, taking this card gave me no points and cost me 21 points. This is why I say being precise in Subastral is absolutely key. It is far more important to be precise than to just get stuff, because taking this card cost me 21 points. And that's the 2 ways you score in Subastral. You score for having different cards, and then you score for having really large sets specifically towards the end over here. That is what you're trying to do and what you're trying to gather, which means let's show you how that actually plays out. You see, on your turn in Subastral, what you're going to do is you're going to play down a card. So for example, let's say I play this, and I'm going to play it to the number that I have over here. This is being played to the number 5. And then I will either gather cards into my tableau over here, or I will gather cards into my hand, because you need to always start your turn by playing a card. So it means you need to ensure that you have cards in your hand. From there, I will either put cards into my journal if I take them from the right over here. So if I go to the right, then you're going to put them into your journal, and if I take them from the left, I will put them into my hand. So in this case, I actually want to add more cards to my hand. I want a little more flexibility, and I don't want just that one card. It's too early in the game. So I'm going to reach over here, I'm going to gather these 2 cards into my hand, and I'm going to draw an additional card from the deck, that's the +1, and add it to my hand. So hand management is a huge part of Subastral. But then I'm going to go ahead and put out a card, and if we ever don't have 2 rows with at least 2 cards, then we add another card, and we put it onto the specific number over there. So always ensuring there's always going to be at least 2 piles with 2 cards. Yes, it can and will happen that you'll have piles with 3 cards. I don't know if I've ever seen a pile with 4 cards, although it could happen, because again, this is about precision, not about more. Sometimes you'll have a pile of cards on the table that is not a good fit for what people want. For my next turn, other people, let's pretend they've taken their turns, and that's important because they might be taking the cards you want. In a solo game over here, I could just set myself up for the perfect turns, which is not the way this typically plays out. Now I'm going to go ahead and start off in places over here, and this time I'm going to take those 2 cards of the same type, which is either helpful or not. It's helpful for getting 2 nice long sets, but I need to be mindful that you don't want to front load the front end of your system without gathering cards for the subsequent side of things. If anything in the front end that you don't have more cards for is not going to help you score points, we're going to go ahead and put this one out, and then again, rinse and repeat gathering cards. My next turn I'm going to go ahead and put this, let's go ahead and put this down over here into the 2 spot, and then we'll gather these, putting them into my journal. I'm getting a 3rd card over there, which is a huge mistake. Rinse and repeat that process as you add cards to the row, as you consistently go through that, as you take cards to your hand, as you juggle and balance the cards in your hand, as you try to gather the right cards to lay out your order until eventually you hit the game end card somewhere in this deck, and then, well, trigger end game. Score up your points, see how you do, as based on the whole scoring thing I showed you earlier, and that is basically Subastral. Which means it's time to talk about this game, talk about the review, all of that. As far as ease of play. Ease of play. This game is actually really easy to teach if you teach it the way I just taught it, at least in my experience. If you teach it based on here's what you're trying to do, gather cards, play cards, I find people don't have a full picture of what they're going for. If you show people what they're going for and how they score, I found this to be a really easy teach. The way I've had it go personally is, the first time I taught the game, I taught it the other way. And then I had to play a few rounds before people got it, and then we sat there and reset the cards. Also worth warning people that you don't have the same number of cards in all the sets, and the sets do vary based on player count. So factor that in, not all sets are created equal. But then if you teach it to other people, or in my case if I taught it to other people, with the other way, I found that people got it from the get-go, and we could go straight into the game without having to reset 2 to 3 rounds in, as people go, oh, now I understand what I'm doing. So that's as far as ease of play. I do recommend teaching it the way I taught it, but your own experience may vary. Past that, table space is minimal. I mean, people have sets of cards, so the more players you have, the more it goes up. Playtime tends to come in at roughly 20 to 30 minutes per game. I find probably just a little closer to the 30-minute mark, but if you play fast enough or at shorter player counts, then maybe not. As far as player count, this is a 2 to 5 player game. I have played this at 2, 3, and 4 players so far, and I think 3 is my favorite, but honestly, all of those player counts were fine. I thought they were all okay. 3 is just a good compromise of having enough rotation in here and also being able to have a faster playtime. 4 started to drag a little bit, and also you didn't have as much reliability as trying to prep your own turns. I thought 3 is a good balance of being able to play a card that you hope to be able to take, versus once you get to 4, it starts feeling a little too random, and at 2, it feels like you have a little bit too much control. Again, all of them were fine. 3 is probably my preferred, then 2, then 4, and I haven't tried it at 5. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, there are lots of decisions here about how to maximize your score, and specifically the biggest aspect of what I like about the game is that precision part of things. The fact that it's not about gathering just stuff that would make the game stupid or make it easy. You always go for the sets of 2 cards, and early game you will. Early game, it generally is helpful to gather those sets of cards. Hey, look, I'm going to grab this. This is really helpful. I can start getting 2 more card types, and I'm prepping myself for that second row. More often than not, in the early game, yes, getting more cards is helpful, but you still have decisions to be made. But then, as you drift towards the second half of the game, every decision matters more. The cards you play down, wondering if they will or won't be taken, matters tremendously. The cards you grab, trying to fit them into your board, trying to decide, at what point do you start executing on that tall row? Do I start executing when I get my 5th row? Because the balance of the game is that the earlier you start trying to build those large sets, inherently the more cards you can get into those large sets. If you try to build a large set as your 8th card, I mean, you only get your 8th card several rounds into the game generally. At that point, you've a third or half the game is gone before you're starting to build that big set. but the multiplier is better. What do you do? What do you execute on? And those things are decisions you'll have to make that are both based on what you have. They're also based on what your opponents are going for. Seeing the order of what your opponents are going for will help you understand what you are facing a higher degree of competition. This is a game where what the other players take does matter. If I see that you have this in your first row, you're unlikely to want more than 2 or 3 of them at most. Whereas if you have it in your 6th, 7th, or 8th row, you and I are going to be fighting over the same cards, and I won't be able to score as efficiently. So I'd rather let these 2 players fight it out and duke themselves over for the same cards, while I go for cards that are not as highly in demand, and that can help, even when you factor in, of course, the fact that cards have different numbers of counts to them. And that's all shown, by the way, on the cards. It shows you a rarity count as far as the number of pips, so you have a quick glance at that. But anyways, the decision space, the precision you have in the game, gives you a lot to consider for a very quick playtime. 20 to 30 minutes per game is a good amount of playtime for what gives you a lot of thought process as far as how to optimize your score. I will say, I do like throwing in an extra set of player cards comparable to the player count. In other words, when I play it at 3 players, I throw in 4 players worth of cards. When I play it at 4 players, I throw in 5 players worth of cards, and I haven't played it at 5 players yet, so I haven't had to deal with that. But I like the fact that it doesn't add that much time to the game, and it gives me a little bit more sense of optimizing my score. It's me cheating, but that's just my own preferred way of playing. I tend to want to get a little bit more done in games than games typically let me do, and that adds to that experience, at least for myself. But overall, the biggest thing about Subastral for me is the amount you get done in a very short and finite playtime, and the amount of decision space as far as what you take, and not always prioritizing the bigger amount of cards, but rather gathering the cards that help you. As far as what I don't like in the game, really it comes down to 2 things. The first is that the first half of the game is a little bit more static. There's still decisions to be made, like I said already, but because of the fact that you haven't yet built your tableau, that whole decision space around more versus precise kind of goes out the window. More often than not, more is better than precise early in the game. And so I do find that of that 30-minute playtime, the first 10 minutes of it does feel a little bit more, okay, let's get to a point where we can start playing our cards. Honestly, I haven't done this yet, but I've considered just dealing out like 2 cards to every player, starting off the bat, just so you can kind of get a few turns out of the way, and you kind of get the fact that, hey, you started with 2 cards. Now, the balance of that is you may not want that because you might want to actually script your first few turns. You might find that there's more decision space, and if you get this rarity or that rarity, you might feel that agency was taken out of your hands. And so, for the short enough playtime, I'm probably not going to bother, but I have considered doing that just to speed it up a bit. But again, it's a good game. It's just the first 10 minutes I find has less decision space, not no decision space, compared to the rest of the experience. And then the second thing is a regular problem for me in games, less so in games that are more filler games, but still a problem, which is this game does have low variability. This game does not have a lot of reasons to jump in again and again and again past the optimization of the gameplay. It's the same game every time. You might have different sets and patterns in the way cards come out, so the experience will unfold in different ways, but practically speaking, it is the same exact game every single time. That's more of a problem for me in heavier, longer, crunchier games. In shorter games, I find that this falls more into filler, so less of a problem, but still something I don't like. As far as what I can see others not liking, it's going to come down to luck of the draw and having good choices versus not. In general, the cards that come out, there's luck of the draw. In fact, the way the turn order goes in the game and who's going for what, there's luck of the draw. If you find yourself trying to fight for cards, if the player after you starts fighting with you on the cards you want, well, you're just going to have to be fighting with that player and you don't have any choice or say in the matter. Remember the part where I said I'm focusing on what you're taking so that I'm not fighting with you? Well, what if the other player is fighting with you? Both of you are being disadvantaged because of their poor decisions, and so there is luck of the draw. There is the aspect of sometimes you don't have the same level of selection or good choices or even what comes out that others want. Not a problem for me in a 30-minute filler game, but it could be a problem for you because it definitely does have a degree of luck in what is otherwise a very precise and procedural, specific game of taking specific cards so that you can score in specific ways. As far as final thoughts on Subastral, this is a fun game. I enjoy Subastral. It gives you a fun scoring puzzle, one that is a lot of decision space for the relative playtime. More is better in the game, except as you actually start playing, in which case specific cards are better. That difference of what you take, how you take it, is a difference between the decision space in the game. It's the difference between winning and losing. It is a little on the light side, it's a little on the lighter side, and with the low variability as well, makes it one that I'm a little bit more in the mix. As I started this video off, I still don't know if this one stays around for a while because I'm enjoying it, I'm having a lot of fun with it, but other games that have been like this have always fallen into the spot of it ultimately depends on how often I pull it out and play it. It's staying for now, to be very clear, but it's one that I simultaneously like it, but also wonder how long it sticks around. As far as other game, as far as rating, it's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. I enjoy this one. I am compelled by it. It gives me a good decision space, but also there is a cap to just how good the game is, given what it's doing and how it's doing it. As far as other game recommendations, specifically I'm going to go with Arboretum and Mandala. Arboretum is a game that doesn't actually play the same way at all, but very much has that same lots going on in a very small space with a nature theme going on in the game, and it's a great game that's very tough, very tense, and it's a game that I've gotten rid of twice. That's one of the reasons I'm wondering how Subastral does for me. I think Arboretum is fantastic, but for some reason it's a game that I didn't play as often as I'd like to, even though the decision space in Arboretum is even more crunchy than Subastral, and does so in a great way. I mean, even just talking about Arboretum kind of makes me want to get it back again. We'll have to figure that out another time. And then Mandala. Mandala specifically has another aspect that I think if you like it in Subastral, you'll like it in Mandala. Mandala is a good game that I very much enjoyed as well. Mandala has this aspect as well that as you gather cards, it kind of defines the value of the scoring. So the first cards you take have less of a value, and the more cards you take, the higher up you go, the more you want those cards. Similar to the way that you kind of want to lock in doubles and triples and quadruples of the sets of cards where you have 5, 6, 7, 8, as opposed to the earlier sets. And Mandala has that same execution in specifically a 2-player game. Different aspects going on as far as how you gather the cards, but it gives you a little bit of similarity in terms of these scoring mechanisms. In any case, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful in some way, shape, or form, and until next time, have a good one.